Hello, you have stumbled onto another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we strive for ways, and actually I should say we discover new ways to achieve those two goals. And normally we invite our friends on to help us, but today it's just me. And I am here to answer some questions that I often hear from people. And number one is, well, the number one, now that people know I have a podcast, one of the big questions I get asked a lot is, how do you start a podcast? So that's what today we're going to talk about. It's a podcast about podcasting. But before we jump into that, I first want to thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to say that we're now being listened to in 21 countries. So that is super amazingly exciting to me. And I want to say a real shout out to Germany, because they are now number 2, with Barbados now dropping to number 3. So you Barbans, please get on the stick there and get some of your friends. And Italy, unfortunately, is number 21. So thanks for joining us, Italy, but you definitely have to get some friends involved in this. And I want to tell you that my goal, we're now in 21 countries, and my goal is to get into, by July 1st, I want to be in 50 countries. So if you can, I mean, there's no way, I mean, maybe there's a way, but it would be so much easier for me to achieve that goal with your help. So please, please, please share this podcast with somebody you know in another country. You definitely are going to want to share it with anybody who is interested in podcasting, because there's going to be a lot of great info in a very short format. So you can probably decide if you want to do a podcast for sure after listening to this podcast, which I hope will help people. And the other thing that's a huge goal of mine is I want to multiply the number of listeners by 50. So that's not on you. You don't have to share with 50 people, but if you could share with 3 people, that would be awesome. So your goal for the week, share the podcast with 2 people in your country and 1 people in another country, 1 person in another country. All righty. Thank you for helping me achieve my goals. If you want to, okay, take that out. If you're watching the video, you'll be like, what is she talking about? Well, the editor is going to take this out. So the first thing you want to think about if you are starting a podcast, or if you're thinking you might want to start a podcast, is what is your goal for the podcast? And a lot of people answer this question by saying, oh, I want a passive income stream. And in my opinion, and I think the opinion of a lot of other people who do podcasting, if your goal is to monetize your podcast, to do a podcast to make money, then you are just not going to succeed. Not because you're not going to make money, but because if you don't love your topic, if you don't have some compelling reason to put out your content every whatever schedule you decide you're going to do it on, then you're probably just not really going to have the stamina. You know, it's not easy. There's a lot of components, a lot of steps. And if you don't love what you're doing, you know, and also, I don't know what people think the numbers are, but for monetizing your podcast, okay, a 10-second ad on your podcast is $15 for every 1,000 listeners that you have. So if you have 1,000 listeners and you do a 15 and you sell some 10-second spots, let's say you sell 5 10-second spots, which in my opinion would be incredibly obnoxious, you're only making $60, okay, or what, $75. So you make $75 or whatever a week. I guess you'd have to do, if you did one an hour, then that would be okay, but you're not going to be able to put out one podcast an hour. So, and even a 60-second spot, which is really long, a 60-second spot is really long, and that's only $25 on average. Now that can change if you have a real niche, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So if your goal is monetizing, I suggest you find, just get a second job and save yourself a lot of headache. But if you have a passion for a project, if there's something that you really love to talk about that you could just, talk about all day long, then you could get lucky. And if you have something that you want to learn, I mean, my reason for starting Get Your Fill was because, first of all, I have a real passion and I love to talk about creating financial independence and ways to create financial independence and helping people to live a longer, healthier, better life. And also that's something that I really want to learn about all the time. So it's something that when I interview my guests, I'm really incredibly interested in what they have to say and what they have to share. So no matter whether anybody listens or not, and I'm very grateful that you are listening, but even if you weren't, I'm learning so much by interviewing all my guests that it's definitely a labor of love. So that's another reason. Okay, so now let's say that you have something you're really passionate about or something that you really want to learn about. Now, what do? You've got to figure out what you're going to name your podcast. And a good way to do this is to look and see what other people, like what catches your eye. And don't think about people who are in the same space as you. Don't think of them as your competition. Think of them as your trainer. So you are going to look at all the ones you can find that are in your same space, and you want to learn about them. Like what drew me to this one? What do I like about this episode? What do I like about this host? And even your next step, which is cover art, you have to have something that's going to be on the thing, on your icon for your show. What is your cover art going to look like? Look and see what catches your eye. You know, we talked to Daryl Evans the other day, and he said the reason that his face is on his podcast is because when he was looking, he felt that the ones with the faces were the ones that grabbed his attention. So if that's going to be your thing, and actually I like that, and I might even change my thing right now. I just have the house with the house sitting on the money, which this is not just real estate focused, so that's maybe not the best thing. So anyway, I digress. So you want to come up with some type of graphic that's going to grab your attention and the attention of your listeners, people who are potentially interested. It's ideal if it can tell you, if when they look at that, they're going to very quickly know what you're talking about. So when you scroll through, you'll see there's a bunch of stuff where you look and you think, oh, if I want to know what this podcast is about, I'm going to have to click on this icon because there's so much verbiage, there's so much words, so many words on this cover art that I just can't even figure out. Whereas, you know, for one about a specific show, you know, there are a lot of fan sites. So if you want to do one about a specific show, you're going to put a big giant picture of that show and people are going to instantly know what it is. So that's, you know, some other stuff to take into consideration when you're considering your graphic, that people will instantly know or very quickly understand the point of what your show is about, and that they'll be drawn to it. There's something in the graphic that's going to catch people's attention. Now, people talk about equipment. Oh, you have to have a really expensive microphone. You have to have all these things and stuff and whatever. And to be honest, that's not 100% necessary. I would not wait and save up for a $2,000 microphone before you start your podcast. I would definitely just get a microphone that gets good reviews. You can get one for under $100, and make sure you have one of those little cloth covers that will keep the P's and the S's from sounding too sharp. And, you know, just go for it. Just do it. We'll talk platforms in a second, but first I want to talk about who is going to be on this podcast. Is it just going to be you? Like today, I'm just me chatting away to you. Or are you going to be talking about, are you going to be interviewing guests? Are you going to have a co-host? I mean, personally, I prefer to have at least one other person on my podcast. This is fine, but it's nicer. It would have been nicer if I would organize for somebody to ask me these questions, and then we could have had a conversation. To me, that's more interesting. This is more just like me talking at you. But the good thing about doing it on your own is that it's your schedule. You just do it whenever you want. The more co-hosts, the more guests, the more people are involved in the podcast, the harder it's going to be for you to schedule and make sure that you're putting out your content in a consistent manner. But that's the next thing to talk about, is how often are you going to air your podcast? I know people who do it every single day. That is a shit ton of work. Let me just tell you right now, that's a lot of work. And you're probably going to have to do something where, you don't necessarily have to, but especially in the beginning, you're going to have to do something probably that isn't edited. So whatever you do is going to have to be just raw. Whereas if you do one a week, you probably are going to have time to both record the episode and edit it. And if you do one a month, I feel like one a month is a little harder to gain traction. You can do one every other week, but I like to just make sure that people know when it's coming out. So this podcast comes out every single Sunday at 11 p.m. Eastern time. Is that the best time? Well, my astrologer said it was. But obviously they're recorded. But the main thing is, if you like to listen on Monday morning, every Monday morning you're going to find a new episode. And that consistency, I feel, is very important, because if somebody likes listening to you Monday morning and you're not there, they might just go find another podcast that's there for their Monday morning commute. So consistency, whatever schedule you decide, make sure it's a schedule that you feel comfortable, that you can live with. Now, I just want to talk for 1 second before we get into anything else. I want to talk about this idea of, oh my God, I just totally forgot. Holy crap, I can't believe I did that. I was thinking about people driving to work and listening to the podcast. And I'm going to pause the recording. This is really bad. Okay, lost that. No idea what I was going to say there. So now, how are you going to introduce your podcast? Are you going to pay somebody? This is a credibility tool. If you pay somebody who sounds really cool, maybe somebody with a foreign accent, to introduce your show and say, hey, welcome to another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life. Or you can have just music or a sound. There's you can have all kinds of cool sounds, like a honking car, like a spaceship landing, whatever. You can get all kinds of free tools like that on the internet. I'm really fortunate to have my intro and outro music, because you can't use music that's licensed unless you pay for it. So you can go find the song you like and license it. Or you can do what I did, is if you have talented friends like Carl Zukroff, you can have somebody to introduce your podcast with their original score of music. So that I'm very excited and grateful to Carl for giving me a piece of music that he wrote, not specifically for me, but when I asked him to write one, he said, oh my God, I have the perfect song for you. So that song that you heard at the beginning is from an original score by Carl Zukroff, who's in the band The Blue Hotel. You can hear more of it. They do a lot of Americana kind of fun, songbook stuff, and they're at thebluehotel.net. And so how are you going to promote your podcast? How is anyone in the world going to find your podcast? Because at last count, there were over 2 million podcasts. 2 million. That's a lot of freaking podcasts. So and the other thing that you need to think about when you're thinking about promotion is that you normally have like a 6 or 8 episode window at the most for Apple to feature you as a new podcast. Now you're competing with hundreds of thousands of new podcasts that are going to launch at the same time that yours launches. So how are you going to set yours apart? You're not going to do one episode and put it on iTunes and say, okay, great, and then hope for the best that you're going to get another one out there. Make sure that you already have, I would say, at least 6 episodes already recorded. So when you put it on iTunes, it's going to be out there consistently, that you're going to be able to have something to back you up. And also by then you'll know if you like doing it. If you do, after 6 episodes, if you're like, oh man, this is the most fun, the most awesome thing I've ever done. Or if you're like, oh man, I can't believe I have to do another flipping episode. That'll give you an idea if you're going to want to be into it for the long haul. But once you get that out there, so obviously being listed as a first a brand new episode on iTunes is great. It'll give you an opportunity to get some new listeners and get your numbers up, but don't count on that. You need to get everybody you know. You're going to build the excitement on social media. You're going to ask all your friends, all your enemies, all your coworkers, everybody to help you promote the show and let them know when it's coming out and say, get on, please go on iTunes. And I say iTunes because that's one of the biggest, but you can, Stitcher, wherever you listen, wherever you want people to listen, you just say, hey, get out there and give everybody the same link so that they're all going to go to the same place, so you can get some leverage and give them the link and say, hey, please go out, please give me a review, please leave some comments, let's get engaged, because obviously all these automated programs, the more people are interested, the higher it's going to rank, and the more likely that more people are going to find it. So it's not just putting out great content. It's not just, doing it consistently, but you also have to let people know that you're out there and what you're doing and how they can engage with you. Make sure when you get comments that you respond to every single comment. And you can do what I'm doing with video. I mean, my series is also available on YouTube. And that's another way. A lot of people just prefer to watch. And also what I've been doing is I use YouTube a lot of times as my podcast listening. If people have a podcast and it's on video, I just bring it up on YouTube I might not listen. I mean, I might not watch. I may or may not watch, but I just like YouTube as a way of finding new stuff in a specific thing. So you don't have to do video, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of nice, and it gives you that added advantage of having another place for people to find you. So let's talk a little bit about platforms. What I use to actually record my podcast, even now when I'm all by myself, is Zoom. And the reason I like Zoom is you can get a free, you can get a free version of it. Free is good, especially in the beginning. And it's pretty good. You know, you get your video, you get your audio, you get separate tracks, so you can have just your audio to go places, there's a video to go places and things like that. And also it's you know, people, you're not asking your guests, if you have guests, you're not asking them to please download the software and here's how to use it and going through all that kind of stuff. Right now, especially now, a lot of people, most people now know how to use Zoom. So that's what I like. As far as actually hosting your podcast, there are some good free sites. I upload mine to Anchor every week, and it's very easy to also record your podcast on Anchor. You can add stuff there. You can do a lot of things. You can experiment, you know, with a free version of Anchor and just see how it works. If you like it, Buzzsprout is another really popular one. They have a free version, but as always, you know, you might, if you stick with it, you're probably going to find that you want to upgrade to the paid version because it gives you a lot more of the features that you're going to want and need for doing a really great podcast. Now let's talk about, are you going to do this live or are you going to do it recorded? It's really fun to do it live. You can have people calling in, asking questions and that kind of stuff. The thing about that is if you're going to stream it live, you have to do it at the same time every day. I mean, sorry, you have to do it at the same time every time, the same day, the same time. Like, oh, I'm gonna do my podcast on the 3rd of the month every single month, or the first Sunday every single month, or whatever. And make sure that you and your guests and everybody are coordinated to that time. So that's a bit of a commitment. You know, you can't never go on vacation again. Or if you do, you'd have to have a guest, or you have to do your podcast on vacation, you know, which is, I guess, easy to do now, but it's something to think about based on your lifestyle. Now you can record it live at a specific time. You can record it live and let people know when it's going live and then edit it and put that edited version, because if it's live, you can't edit it, right? Once you do it live, it's out there in the world, it's streamed, and any mistakes, any, you know, technical glitches, anything like that, are you just, sorry, too bad. But if you do it, what I do, I just record it and I send it to the editor and then I put up the edited version. But you also have the option of doing a combo where you record it whenever you record it, but you don't stream it. So you say, oh, everybody, I'm doing my live recording at this date, call in with your questions and blah, blah, blah. And then when that's done, you send that to the editors or you edit it yourself and take out any pauses and glitches and ums and ahs and, oh crap, I forgot what I was going to say, stuff like that. And then put that edited version out. So a hybrid is actually really nice if you can do that scheduling wise. And it's great to have an audience. You know, you can do it live without an audience, where it's just you and the guest. But if you're going to do it live, why not have an audience? I mean, it's awesome to have people calling in questions and just making the show a lot more fun and interactive. But don't count on having an audience, because if nobody has any questions, then you might just have some dead space. So another thing you can think about is length. There used to be the perfect podcast length was 22 minutes because that was the average commuting time. But you know what? Most of us aren't commuting anymore. And by the way, what's wrong with somebody having to listen to 2 podcasts at the, you know, on their commute, or have to listen to half of it on the way home and half of it on the way to work and half of it on the way home? So just do what feels right to you. You don't have to have, there's no like real rules about what you have to do with that. Just do what feels good organically. You know, some of my shows are over an hour and some of them are 30 minutes. This is probably going to be one of the shorter ones because it's just me blabbling to you on my own. So the services, I definitely recommend that you put it on iTunes. I touched on this a little bit earlier, and they are still the biggest. So I have, you know, 21% of people listen on iTunes, and then there's like 3% on this one and 2% on this one. And then there's another one, which is 60% on other, which God only knows what that is. It's a combination of all different other platforms and probably some YouTube and my website, which is getyourfillpodcast.com. And so anyway, don't get hung up on that when you get your show ready. upload it to iTunes, upload it to any of the other ones that don't automatically syndicate from iTunes. And you can kind of Google that and find out what those are. And then, you put up your cover art, you put up a description of the show. And that gets me into another topic, which is a transcript. Are you going to have a transcript for your show? And the thing is, Google can't search your audio right now. It probably doesn't want to, but it can search your transcript. So if you have a transcript on your website and somebody's looking for something that's specific to what you're talking about, there is a chance that Google will find it on your podcast website or on Anchor or wherever. You can't put your whole transcript on Anchor, but you can put excerpts. You have to have a show description anyway, because you're not going to put the thousands of things on, you're not going to put thousands of words, and you're not going to, what am I saying? So you're going to need a description anyway, because these syndication sites are not going to suck up the whole thousands of words of your transcript. But your transcript can help you to create your description. Or you can use, like I often use the bio for the person I'm interviewing, and then like a little description about what we talked about. But the other thing about a transcript is that in addition to Google not being able to listen to your podcast, some other people can't listen to your podcast. There are people who are hearing impaired who just are not able to participate in your podcast with their ears. And by using a transcription service, you have the ability, the people are able to catch you there. They're able to find you there. And that's wonderful. It's really wonderful. Now, I used to use Scribie, Cribie. And Scribie does a great job. You can do one where you pay somebody to edit it, or they have an automated one where it's just 10 cents a minute, and it goes through and a machine listens to it, and then that's your transcript. Now, I used to do that, and then I would go back and edit it, because the machine sometimes makes some really big mistakes and it's kind of confusing. So now what I do, I actually use a different service, which I like, which is Podscribe. And I think a lot of people subscribe to Podscribe, and, because you can listen and read along with it at the same time. And I used to sit and edit every single episode, which takes hours and hours and hours. And it was a real killer. And I found I was getting behind. So now what I do instead is I'll pop in there, I'll change the names, because they don't know the names of the host and the guest. So you change the 0 to a person's name, and the 1 to a person's name. And then I just do a really quick scan looking for really obvious mistakes. And it lets you to wherever you find a mistake, you can just hit Control Shift play, or whatever it is, Control mouse click, and then you can go right to that spot and you can hear what actually was said, and then you can, correct that. So there you will find some errors in my Podscribe transcripts, but it's much better than what I was getting with Scribie with the automated one. There's also a person one, but that's more like $1 a minute, and I didn't want to go that route. You absolutely can. Are you going to edit it yourself, or are you going to have someone edit it? I thought for 5 seconds about doing it myself, but then thank God Savannah came along. Carl, my person who did my intro and outro, recommended an editor to me, Savannah, who's so fantastic and has absolutely saved my life. But that's a cost, right? So if you want to have a person to do your editing, then not only do you have the cost of whatever else you're paying for, like maybe your website. Are you going to have your own website so you can put links and stuff and other promo and all your transcript? Are you going to have that, or are you going to have do it yourself, which to me was the big gigantic I didn't want to learn a new software package. And I have no doubt that I would not have done a bit as good of a job as Savannah does. So thank you, Savannah. And thank you for listening. If you have specific questions about starting a podcast, my first thing to say would be Google it. Everything. There's so many people writing about how to do a podcast, giving you paid. You can take a class on how to create a podcast. You can do all kinds of stuff. But I would say if you think that you want to do a podcast, so I was going to say, you can definitely send me your questions. I'd be happy to try to answer as many questions as I can about starting a podcast. But, analysis paralysis will kill you. Just do it. Just get on, just right now, hop on anchor.fm and just say, oh, I want to create my podcast, and just do everything. And, work on it and tweak it before you deliver it to iTunes, but just play with it. Get people to listen to it. Have them give you their feedback, make sure that you, like for most of this podcast, my washing machine was going, and, you might have heard that in the background, and that sucks. Like, why would someone do that? Well, scheduling, it's Sunday morning. I got to get this thing out. Savannah's tapping her foot, waiting for the stuff. But at the end of the day, you are going to need to tweak and discover what works best for you. And you're not going to figure that out 100% on the drawing board. You want to find that perfect blend between thinking about what you want to do and just doing it. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that this helped answer some questions of people who are thinking, oh, how the heck do I start a podcast? And I also hope that you have a fantastic week. Next week, we're starting a series, which I'm very excited about. And I'm having people who own companies that do things associated with home renovation and home building. And each week, we're going to have somebody to talk about tips about not only hiring, for example, a great painter. How do I know that I'm hiring a great painter? But also, what if I want to do it myself? So these folks are going to share with us information that will basically put them right out of business. Not really, because we know the more we help people, the more that the world, the universe helps us. So they're going to give us tips of how we can do some stuff ourselves, and how to recognize that this is over our heads, we can't do it ourselves, and how to find a good person who's going to do it for us. So I think no matter what you do, no matter who you are, there's some project that you probably wanted to tackle or didn't want to tackle. So I think you'll get a lot of value of that. I hope you get a lot of value out of that. And please be sure to share this, because it's on you to help me get to 50 countries by July 1st. And right now we're only in 21 countries. So please, Germany, keep up the great work. Barbados, I'm so excited you're here. And actually, if you have another second, why don't I just tell you some of the amazing countries that we have here? Because I'm very, very excited about it. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to read off the countries. So if you're bored with that, then you don't need to listen. You just need to have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next week. But if you're interested, so these are in order of listeners. So the US, of course, number one, Germany, Barbados, Pakistan, Canada, the UK, Kenya, New Zealand, Japan, Puerto Rico, Russia, Brazil, Hong Kong, Spain, Ghana, Malaysia, Israel, Serbia, the Philippines, and Italy. Thank you so much. I can't even tell you how exciting and thrilling and wow, awesome it is for me to know that you're out there listening around the world. So anyway, have a great week. Thank you again for everybody who's listening, and see you next week with the beginning of the Contractor Helper series. I'll probably give it hopefully a better name by next week.